Okay, so in the last part we stopped at the four I's, and basically, socially, economically, politically, the world is rapidly changing, and its evolution, in its evolution, it requires for its leadership. Okay, so when you're considering, when you're getting ready to go, and you're doing your thing, you need to know: are these people that you are considering, are they do they have individuality, independence, initiative, and intelligence? These are the four characters of somebody that should be in office. If they lack these four things, then they should not be operating in an office. So individuality. Under the guarantees given by the Constitution, there has been developed in the American character. Okay, another one of those things that you need to look at is what is exactly the American character. Okay, the American character is composed of morals, ethics, principles, and ideals. And these are things that you need to understand in order to understand who you are as an American. American character, a striking individuality which stamps him an American wherever he may be found. It is that quality which inspired him to the conquest of the great American wilderness and the development of her resources. The urge of individuality has driven him in every undertaking, not only for pecuniary reward, but for the equal reward of stamping his achievement with his own personality. This distinctive bearing of the American commands attention and wins the confidence of all. Conscious of his own strength, he asks no other favor than equal opportunity. To have equal opportunity is one of the most important things that any form of government can offer to its people. Okay, and it's not that the government is offering it. It is one of the characters that the people should put into a form of government that they develop. When he marries, he seeks no dower with his bride. He accepts his place in life with dignity, born in the consciousness of his own power to better it. So one of the characteristics of an American is that deep within him, he knows that he has the ability to better his situation, whether he was born in the ghetto or he is born in the most luxurious mansion in America. Either way, he has the ability to better himself if he will apply the principles and ideals of the American spirit. Be it ever so humble, his home is marked with his personality. His children bear the impress of his character, giving assurance that life can contain no difficulties too great for them to master. An American doesn't perceive a difficulty that is too great to master. Rather, the American spirit perceives a difficulty as something that can be mastered or overcome or bettered in some way, form, or fashion. His is the consciousness of the freeborn. Whether born in the crowded tenement of a congested city, the lonely prairie home of a western farmer, or within the sumptuous palace of a millionaire, imbued with the spirit of the nation, he stands upon his own feet and gladly enlists as a soldier in the battle of life. Okay, in the earth that we dwell in, we are currently in a present evil age, a present evil world, and the battle of life is really and truly good versus evil. Now, of course, we're not taught these things because evil has been dictating all things to mankind for the last 6 generations, and I'm talking about every mankind, every individual all over the earth in any nation, including the United States of America. So we haven't had this mentality. We haven't understood that the battle is literally to hold back evil on the earth, to subdue it or to overcome it, so that we have good on the earth, and so that we pass something better to the next generation than what we had while we were dwelling on the earth. Independence. This is another characteristic of leadership that you're looking for. The American is the personification of independence. He asks no favors of government or men. Okay? He doesn't ask for handouts from the government. An American. So, we have people that have food stamps. We have people on SSI, Social Security, all of these benefits. Okay? And I'm not saying that it's wrong to have them, but what I am saying is that originally the United States didn't give handouts to people. Now, if you was in a situation where you had side effects and all these other things that were wrong with you, then yes, the government would step in and help that family. But usually it was left up to the church and the community to support that individual. He has cultivated the habit of self-reliance and, he demands his rights and is always ready to uphold them. See, you have certain unalienable and unalienable rights. But if you don't uphold them, if you don't stand on them, then you lose them. A maximum of law is that if you don't know your rights, then you don't have any rights at all. Okay, so a lack of education, a lack of knowledge takes away your rights. And when any form of government, whether it's local, state, or national, when a servant gets out of hand and tries to walk all over your rights, you are supposed to uphold your rights. Which we see that today, like when they tried to take away mankind's ability to breathe the very air that makes him a living soul, mankind, for the most part, I mean, there were some of us, but for the most part, just went ahead and went with the tyranny, put the mask on, and all these things. Even though the holes in a mask are so massive, that there's no possible way that you could stop with the mask. I mean, it would just go right through the holes with ease. I mean, without any effort whatsoever. But we don't stop and consider what are our rights, and we don't even know what our rights are if we haven't read the constitutions and all of the constitutions of each and every single one of the states, because it's scattered throughout all the different constitutions. What is your rights? But again, if you don't uphold them, if you don't stand on them, then you gradually allow tyranny to consume you and to take away your freedoms, and at the same time working against your morals, so that they bring you into immorality. Taking away your freedom and morals takes away liberty 100%, and you literally just are a slave and no longer what you were intended to be. Let's continue. So he has cultivated the habit of self-reliance and is ready to undertake any legitimate enterprise which, in his judgment, has a reasonable chance of success. Resourceful and unafraid. Resourceful and unafraid. Remember, these people looked right into the greatest military power on earth and said, we're walking away from you. We're going to start something different here. We're going to have liberty. We're going to have justice. We're going to have the ability to have their grievances heard, etc., etc., etc. We're going to maintain rights, blah, blah, blah. And just declared it and went with it, knowing that it would probably cost them their life. Okay? Unafraid. Absolutely unafraid. He has ventured into every field of endeavor, cheerfully paying the cost of his failure as cheerfully sharing with others the rewards of his success. In the spirit of independence, America has won her way to leadership in times of peace and in times of war, to a place of honor and respect among the nations. Now, nowadays that's not true. Okay, again, what I'm trying to help you to see is that the America of today is not the America of the first 6 generations of existence of this nation. It is we have complete. I mean, the ways of the original America aren't even in the minds of men in America these days. The thoughts of Americans today do not in any way, form, or fashion resemble the thoughts of the founding fathers and the original America. And being what it is today, basically we aren't respected among the nations. Now, we were temporarily while Donald was in office, but once the show began and this thing was forced out in the light for people to see, then it became clear that we are not respected among the nations, and it's all based on who we have in leadership in the executive branch in this particular case. Of course, a lot of that has to do with who you have in the House and also in the Senate, and also who you have on the judicial branches. But basically, you see this guy come into office, and then all of a sudden we can see that we are unrespected, and it's that simple, because it's not about independence to this individual. He's all about Revelation 3:9 principles, which is 2939 principles, which is communism and that kind of a thing. So initiative. Out of independence has grown a force of individual initiative, which has made our great achievements possible. Initiative might well be termed the generator from which has come the power for all our accomplishments. So it's the initiative, that spirit of initiative to take what already exists and to make it even better, or to take something that doesn't exist and bring it forth, a new technology, or a new thing. Tradition looks always to that which is old in habits, customs, culture, government, institutions, families, and structures. Initiative is forever putting off the old and putting on the new. It is the mother of creative genius expressed in science and innovation. Now, this document is talking about the real, genuine science, not the science so-called that Timothy was warned about. Without initiative, civilization would first stagnate, then fall rapidly into dissolution. In no community in the world is freedom of initiative enjoyed as fully as in America. Governments, law, customs, traditions operate to enhance that freedom. That's how it's supposed to operate, and if we had everything legitimate and we had the right people in office, that's exactly how it would operate. Intelligence. So far, our minds have grasped each successful problem and found so far the means of meeting each added complexity of modern civilization. With multiplied wants and ever-expanding fields of endeavor, the demand for intelligence increases. Machines are taking the place of hands, increasing production, shortening hours of labor, eliminating the exhaustion of toil, giving more time to self-betterment, recuperation, and recreation. Markets become worldwide, competition grows keener, international affairs demand care and diplomacy. Nations are awakening. The magic of science in transportation and communication has made us largely a family of nations with divergent aspirations, varied needs, and growing demands for self-expression. And truly, the world as we know it today is basically a family of nations. Now, we have bad actors in certain in high positions in certain nations, which make them like family members that we don't too much care for. People have these in their family. It's the same thing among the nations. I mean, each individual nation is its own independent thing with its own aspirations and needs. But altogether we're a family because this nation produces this and this other nation doesn't have that, so they need that, but they have this and that other nation don't have that, so they swap and they sell and they purchase and from each other, and it's literally a family of nations. It's a giant cooperation. At least that's how it's supposed to be. Of course, that's not how it is right now because we're dealing with wickedness on a very large scale. But the earth as intended to be, as it was created to be, is a cooperation from dirt to plants to animals to people to nations and all the other different things. All things are literally a massive cooperation. Anytime you break any part of that cooperation, you hurt everybody on earth, literally. It's all interconnected. And so really having evil anywhere on the earth is a very bad situation and needs to be dealt with. This is why, when he formed up Israel, when God formed Israel, he told them to literally utterly destroy these wicked descendants of the Nephilim giants and the sons of God and the daughters of men sleeping together. But we know that Israel constantly messes up and either takes one of their idols or carved images or whatever, and something ends up happening and they end up going and serving other gods, and God has to deal with them and discipline them and remove them from their land and all sorts of stuff. And eventually, basically, and I say basically because he can't fully divorce Israel, but basically he divorces Israel, then comes as a man, dies on a cross, releasing Israel so that he could remarry who? The Eternal One, the Eternal Son of God. And so that all nations can come into a cooperation and help one another, all these different things. But, again, we're in a time of wickedness. But there could be, in the near future, a whole new world. I mean, literally, if you can deal with wickedness, if you can get the people, not just Americans, but people all over the earth awake and educated in the truth, and that all governments are instituted for the benefit of the people, and when they get outside of that operation and come against the people, they need to be dealt with. Okay, whether that's abolishing it and reforming it, or going after the people in office, the juridical persons, and dealing with them personally, because they swore an oath to the Constitution, so you can hold them accountable to the Constitution, etc. It's all in our hands, what we do with it all. The price of success. The price of success, whether of individual or nation is found in work, education, and ideals. Now, I'm not going to cover this. You guys can come read this. I want to move on down here to the next section. But I want to just re-emphasize that last part there. The price of success, whether individual or nation. Individually, what each individual does has a national impact. Okay? Now, General Finn got busted for having a prayer that is basically comes from satanic principles and prayer. That's exactly what it is. I don't know personally where he stands. I don't know why he believes that. I don't know if he is a Freemason. I'm not going to make any claims. I haven't had the opportunity to do a deep dive research into his exact past. But what he preaches, or what he's been telling the people, is absolutely what needs to take place, and that is local action has a national impact, and that is true, and it's very clear through this document that is in fact the way that it is. Okay, so he's been exposed. Like I said, there's nothing that anybody can do now without being exposed. The people are awake, and that is the key. That is what changed during the letter operation and Donald as the President of the United States. The people literally woke up and started questioning things rather than going with groupthink. The letter operation taught them, don't go with groupthink, don't go with what you were taught. Get out here, do your research, watch what these people are doing, expose things that you see, etc., etc., etc. Learn the truth and hold the people accountable. Think for yourself. Don't just go with what you're told, or what the media tells you, or what this Hollywood actor said, or this scientist said, or that scientist. Look it up, see if it's true. If it is, then broadcast that out. If it is not, then, expose that which is a lie and get it corrected. But individuals, each individual, how that individual turns out has a national impact on the national character or the national level of the American character. And so, when you see someone that is lacking, for example, say in education, or doesn't have the principles or the ideals of America, then it's our duty and responsibility to go to that individual and to educate that individual, to help them to see what they cannot see, because that is what's going to set them free. Literally. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. The truth is in Jesus Christ, okay, in the Word of God. The Word of God was made flesh and dwelt among us. That's Jesus. In America itself, the truth of who you are, what your position is, and what your authority is what's going to set you free. Government has convinced the people that they have absolute authority, absolute power, absolute all political everything. That is not the case, and we will show that probably in the next video. I think it would be hopefully it'll be the next video where we start to get into the solutions. But we need to help these people that are undereducated or lack the ideals or the principles or the work ethic, etc., to help them, because when they see that everything they do has a local impact, a state impact, a county impact, a state impact, and a national impact, it begins to change the individual and realize, oh, this is more than just about me. It's about an entire nation of people under God who believe in liberty and justice and the rights of the people. And it's worth defending and fighting for, because if America is overtaken utterly and completely, it's game over for the rest of the world, period. And God ain't going to let that happen. He's always going to have a remnant that are willing to stand up and to do their responsibilities and duties as they learn them. And a massive, major part of that is educating people. Anyway, let's get on down here. So now he's going to kind of basically take us through the history of mankind, right? So basically the historical background is the historical background of liberty and independence, is the story of the human race, or mankind, in every stage of its development and in every corner of the earth. It is told in the age-old pyramids of Egypt, builded upon the backs of human slaves, in the philosophies of Plato and Socrates, and uncovered in the catacombs of Rome. In the German forests it was planted deep, in the hearts of the Saxon and Norman, and they're given its first real resemblance or semblance of form. England, in the days of the Saxon and Norman conquest, in time of Cromwell and Elizabeth, laid a still broader foundation upon which to build the structure of self-government. This is the time period in which we begin to see the clay coming into effect, where we begin to see the formation of self-government. Now, it has its flaws, it has its errors, it has its things, but we see the springing forth for the first time since the Genesis chapter 1 verse 2 onward, that we have a bringing forth of a self-government. Slowly there was evolved an appreciation of government incorporation of the rights of individuals into fixed laws and practices. So as time begins to press forth and this self-government begins to blossom and to come forth and to bring out its true leaves and its first branches and etc., 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 we begin to see fixed laws, written laws that establish the rights of people and the responsibilities and duties of those people that are in government or in office of government in some way, some form, or some fashion. And these laws and practices begin to grow and expand as time moves forward, even though we're dealing with a iron and clay mixture, and we have this false church, this false Christ, this false everything infiltrating everything. We have the clay, the Saxon and Norman people working on the development of self-government. Yet there remained the iron heel, right? Iron mixed with clay, the iron heel of government to crush those whose demand for independence and liberty exceeded that granted by the will of the ruling king or parliament. So we see this feudalism type thing, this control that is trying to suppress the formation of this self-government. So in other words, basically what you're seeing is the control of this iron kingdom, this Rome, trying to control the people, but end up intermingling with them and mixing in with them and allowing them to have certain freedoms in order for them to stop fighting or stop opposing the iron. 104 tells us that slow development of necessary knowledge. So it remained, however, a work, self-government, a work still to be accomplished at the time of the first settlements in America, where in the next 150 years slow progress was to be made in developing the necessary knowledge upon which liberty and independence could safely rest. So there was a process in which knowledge had to be increased, and they had to work out all the different aspects of government and how exactly do you maintain the rights of the people while having this necessary evil called government. Okay, you're always going to have a form of government in some way, form, or fashion, because in no given place are 100% of the people self-governing. If you could get every single individual to self-govern, you wouldn't need a government in any way, form, or fashion. But it will always be necessary and always be required in order to keep liberty, that is, in order to keep morals and freedoms and the rights of the people. This is why they were so adamant and gung-ho about making sure that the federal servant would be very, very limited in its scope and in its powers. The federal government has 19 powers in which it is the absolute law of the land. As long as it's within those 19 powers, they have absolute say in those things. Those are the powers that were delegated to them, and as long as they remain within those 19 powers and don't go outside of it, then that is the law of the land, period. Okay? Now, when they go outside of it, the lawful persons, the capital letter S states, are supposed to oppose that and say, no, we're not doing that in this state because you need to show me where in the Constitution, where in your charter you have the authority to do that. Now, when the state governments refuse to do their part and do their role and to refuse that which is corrupted, then it falls back to the people themselves and to hold the people in office accountable according to the oath that they took. But it required knowledge, okay? And they had to go through experiences and suffer and do all these different things in order to learn what is required to maintain liberty and justice, to maintain this independence, this self-governance. this great experiment of self-governance, something that is unique in all of the earth. Declaration of Independence, a protest. The Declaration of Independence was a protest against the abridgment of such rights as the colonists claimed as subjects of the British Crown. Their anger was directed against Parliament rather than the King, because restrictions were placed by law upon the colonists which were not imposed upon citizens of Great Britain residing in the mother country. So Parliament was pushing these things onto the colonies that wasn't required of the citizenry that was there in Great Britain. And a colony is a subdivision of Great Britain, and the people in that colonies are citizens of Great Britain, and so you had an inequality here. You had a prejudice between the people in the motherland and the people out here in these colonies, and this is what they were actually protesting. These operated solely for the benefit of the long-established home government and institutions, spurred by the spirit of independence engendered through the bitter experience and necessary self-reliance required in their century and a half battle to conquer the American wilderness, and fired by the indignities and injustices to which they had long been compelled to submit, they threw off the yoke of oppression and set up government that would forever guard them against tyranny, however it might seek to impose its will. So this was the people that threw off the yoke of oppression and set up a government that would forever guard them against tyranny, against oppression, against control, however it may seek to impose its will. In whichever form it wants to come at us, we are ready to defend and to keep our independence. Then it goes into the Declaration of Independence. And a quote from Webster. Independence of the colonies. The American colonies did not become free and independent until they were strong enough to throw off the yoke of the oppressor, strong enough to set up and control their own government, set up and control their own government through the voice of the people, strong enough to protect and defend their country from aggression, whether from within or without. And this is still the oath that is taken, that they're willing to defend against an enemy from within or without. And, you know, they've got to be held accountable. We have an enemy within right now. Okay? Every nation on earth has an enemy within right now. This evil that is upon every nation that has been forced out into the light. Its enemies. The enemies within, who would make the Declaration of Independence a mockery, play one group of Americans against another. Catch that. Enemies within. We're talking, remember, this is, to me personally, my opinion, okay? Don't go out here and say TGA said this is a fact. TGA says that this is his opinion, right? That this is a white hat operation that they did as a training manual in order to educate, at the very least, those who join the army. That way they could get a base from which they could expand this understanding to the rest of the people on earth. This was their attempt to bring back patriotism and to get this nation back under control, all the way back in the 1920s. And so they're explaining how this enemy that is within is operating. And he says that the enemies within, who would make the Declaration of Independence a mockery, what do? They play one group of Americans against another. What happened in the so-called Civil War? Right? They played one group of Americans against another, the South against the North. What are they doing today? You got the letter Anon versus the letter Operation. You've got the people who have taken the thing and those who haven't taken the thing posed against one another. The educated against the uneducated, etc., etc., etc. Look, there are no divisions, guys. That's all man-made. All of it. Anyways, they fanned the flames of prejudice. They fanned the flames of prejudice. White, you know what the word is, right? That's what they say all the time. And that the whites are against the others, and blah, 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 you know. Same thing. They magnified fancied ovals of injustices to the ignorant. The Rittenhouse thing, right? They painted a completely and utterly different picture than the actual reality, and they claimed an injustice to the ignorant. They distort its language to suit their own ends so cleverly that many of the less informed follow them in the name of Americanism. What do? Distort its language. This is what we see in the bar. This is what we see in legalese. When you walk into a courtroom and they say, "Are you Jeremiah Dodds?" and I say, "Yeah, I'm Jeremiah Dodds." They look at their paper and they see this all capital letter named Jeremiah Dodds, and they just make the assumption that that's me, because I don't understand the distortion of their language. So then you have various different trials and with this distorted language, and when the trial is complete and everything like that, everything's done in the name of Americanism, not realizing that everything just got twisted. You see how this all operates? And they were explaining this all the way back shortly after we were taken over. It's survival. Every American citizen must be constantly on guard if the principles set forth in the Declaration of Independence are to survive. Do you know what the Declaration of Independence says? Do you know it word by word? How can you be constantly on guard of the principles that are found in that Declaration of Independence if you don't even know what it says? So you need to educate yourself. You need to go read that. You need to memorize that document, as well as the United States Constitution, as well as the Constitution of the state that you live in. You need to have these internalized, like you have the Word of God internalized, or at least should have internalized. You should be getting in the Word, staying in the Word, until the Word itself is in you. That is Christ in you. The Word of God became flesh and dwelt among us. See, Jesus in physical form did not exist prior to God conceiving the only begotten Son of God in the womb of Mary. And when he took his first breath and became a living soul, for the first time, God, that is the Word of God, which is God, had flesh, and he dwelt among us. Now the Word of God can't err against itself, and so he lived a righteous and perfect life because he is God. But he ends up laying down his life as the penalty on our behalf to set us free, to redeem us, to purchase us back from the kingdom of darkness, which we could not do because we had all fallen short of the glory of God. But you should absolutely know what the law says. The Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States, and the Constitution of your state is the law concerning those people that are in office. So if you want to hold them accountable, you got to know what powers were delegated to them, and what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. And that's all written out in the constitutions. And you hold them accountable because they swore an oath to uphold the state and U.S. Constitution. Liberty defined. There are two kinds of liberty. Absolute liberty, that of the savage, in which any individual may act as he pleases, and civil liberty, that of a civilized community in which human actions are regulated by law for the good of all, subject only to such restraints as a solemn and tolerant judgment determines to be essential. So the absolute liberty, which some people want absolute liberty, which removes society, but if you have absolute liberty, then anybody can do whatever the heck that they want to do. That's absolute liberty. You can go and steal a nuclear bomb and detonate it. That's absolute liberty. Right? So what you have to have is civil liberty. That of a civilized community in which human actions are regulated by law for the good of all people. So there's certain laws which are essential, and those laws need to be maintained by all people in order to create a civil liberty. Because you are not the only individual on earth, and you have interconnected relationships all around you, whether it's in work or play. There are these essential laws that must govern all people in order to maintain a societal liberty, or a national liberty, or a local liberty, or a county liberty, or a state liberty. Blackstone tells us that political liberty is no other than natural liberty so far restrained by human laws and no further as is necessary and expedient for the general advantage of the public. Again, you got to have some basic essential laws, but you never allow those laws to go past that point. Okay, there's a cutoff. Only those laws which are essential for the safety of the public as a whole. Those are the only laws. After that, when they move past that and they start trying to take away your personal, private health and these kinds of things, then they're outside of their jurisdiction, they're outside of their contract, they're outside of their charter, they're outside of their oath, they're outside of everything, and these people need to be held accountable. Liberty does not free the people from the necessity for control, but it places a heavy burden of responsibility upon the individual for self-control. Self-control. The more self-control that exists, the less law that is required in order to create a public liberty or civil liberty. The more that the people become unethical and immoral and all these other things, the more that law requires to step in and to hold people accountable because they have become outside of the law. Where does liberty come from? When you go into your Old Testament and you see the law, right? As long as the people kept their part of the bargain, they were protected by God. Their enemies couldn't infiltrate them. Their enemies couldn't touch them. Not a single one of them died. Everything was taken care of. When they walked outside of their contract with God, outside of the laws of God, then evil befell them. Liberty is upheld through morals and through principles and through ideals that come from God. And when you remove these things and people become immoral or any other type of thing that is outside of the will of God, then all of a sudden you have a need for more and more law in order to keep the people themselves in check. So you have this domino effect of more and more and more laws as people become more and more amoral. So one of the main things that the mothers should be teaching their children is that moralities and principles, first of all, religion, belief in God, and the Son of God, so both the Father and the Son, but principles and moralities and the ideals of America, all these different things, in order to teach them self-control. Because the more that people are self-controlled, the less essential law is required. See, it is not licensed to do as one pleases. To develop intelligence, man has power to control his baser and more selfish instincts. See, the more selfish we become, the less cooperation that takes place, and the nation or the locality, the county, the community, the state, or the nation begins to collapse. Because it's what is required for society to thrive is opportunity, intelligence, and self-control, and the removal of selfishness. Okay? We were never a nation of material things, but because of our unending individual ambition, we continue to press forward every day, advancing farther and farther and farther, taking that which exists and improving it and making it better and better and better and better, so that everything continues to thrive. Industry thrives, people thrive, everything thrives. The state, the local, the county, the community, the nation, everything thrives. But when selfishness gets infiltrated and it becomes about one's own self, like Lucifer in heaven saying, I'm going to be like God, and I'm going to do all these things, and I'm, then all of a sudden you have the process of collapse. You have the process of destruction. The forces of chaos are beginning to work. But backing up here, through the developed intelligence, man has power to control his baser and more selfish instinct, compelling their exercise and restriction in the interest of society, in order to create cooperation, to keep things rolling, to keep things moving forward, to stop things from becoming stagnant. Minority control exercises this will until such time as general intelligence becomes sufficiently informed to establish an order of society with a larger and more even distribution of benefit to all, and the law of will, that is force, or selfishness, is supplanted by the law of reason. See, it's not about you. individually. You have individual rights, and that is in fact a thing. It is about individualism. But it's not about selfishness. And it can't be about selfishness, because you are not the only individual on earth. You are not the only family on earth. So it can't be selfishness on the individual level or family level. You have to consider the prosperity of your nation, and you are dealing, if you're an American, your inheritance is a nation that stands for liberty and justice. The only nation on earth that stands for these things, and the rights of the people, not of government, and rather a very limited government as far as its scope or its delegated powers, because the power, all political power, is inherent in the people. So it can never be about you and your own personal absolute liberty. You must come from the perspective of how do you help your community, that city that you dwell in, that town that you dwell in, that farming community that you dwell in. How do you benefit and help to develop your county, to help it to become more prosperous and more abundant and more cooperative? How do you affect your state? How do you affect your nation? In order to bring about greatness, because that's what this land of opportunity is all about. Freedom. And it is this freedom and this liberty and these morals and these ideals and these principles and this removal of selfishness that makes this land like no other land on earth. It is literally a light on a hill for all of the other nations that are in darkness. But we're all in darkness now, and we're all having, the most important thing that anyone can do right now is help to educate the American public. All the world is watching America, looking to the Americans. What are y'all going to do? We know your history. We know who you are. We know your claim as the Christians, right? We're the only nation on earth that is known as a Christian nation, a genuine Christian people that believe in Jesus Christ and go out unto all the world proclaiming Jesus to everybody. And they're looking to us saying, what are you and your God that you claim is the one true God, what are y'all going to do? Hopefully, we educate each other. As defined in the preamble to the Constitution, liberty is the absence of arbitrary human restraints upon personal conduct other than those imposed by the authority of just laws, obedience to which is an essential part of it. So, as long as you are dealing with just law, you are to give your consent and leave selfishness behind. When you are dealing with unjust laws, you should never ever consent. You should never comply to unjust law. Only just law. That law which is within the 19 powers, or those laws which are established in the state constitutions for the states. Fundamental law. The rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are beyond the right of any government. Any government. You live in Africa, your government. You live in Russia, your government. Live in Great Britain, your government. Live in Germany, your government. Live in Israel, your government. Okay? Wherever you live. Beyond the right of any government to legally usurp or infringe. This is the Blackstone. To secure this, that is liberty, is the main business of governments and the reason for their institution. If they fail in this, they have failed in all. At that point, you must abolish it and establish a government that is best for your liberties, your pursuit of happiness, etc. These principles are written by our fathers into a constitution of government for the first time in human history. This is what sets America apart, guys. When they wrote the Constitution, and it became the fundamental law of a new nation dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, and that government derives its just powers from the consent of the governed. So we create the government, and we choose to be governed by that government. But we hold that government accountable. And there's no other place in the constitutions that places that law enforcement of those in office with any other government or governmental position. It's only with the people. The people are the ones that are the law enforcement of those in office. Equality. What is meant by equality is clearly defined by Lincoln in his debate with Douglas. Okay, Lincoln. In responding to Douglas' question, "What do you mean, all men are created equal?" Lincoln replied, "I think the authors of that notable instrument intended to include all men, but they did not intend to declare all men equal in all respects. They did not mean to say all were equal in color, or size, or intellect, or moral development, or social capacity. They defined with tolerable distinctness in what respect they did consider all men created equal with certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This they said, and this they meant. They did not mean to assert the obvious untruth that all were then actually enjoying that equality, nor yet that they were about to confer it immediately upon them. In fact, they had no power to confer such a boon. They simply meant to declare the right, so that enforcement of it might follow as fast as circumstances should permit." So, all men being created equal does not imply until all people have the proper intellect, the proper moral development, the proper social capacity, in other words, they've been educated properly. And until that educational process takes place, you do not have all men created equal. But all men are created equal in the simple fact that they have these unalienable rights, which are of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They have that capacity, but they have to be educated in that capacity. And when they are, it will change their character, change their ways, and enable them to be a citizen, which takes their local city, town, whatever, or community, their county, their state, and their nation to whole new levels. But without the education, you're in a stagnated period of time where things are actually not stagnant because they're either moving forward or they're moving downhill. So personal liberty, freedom of action. Every citizen is on an equal footing as to privileges and opportunity. Any denial of such rights results from either the limited ability of the individual to take full advantage of opportunity, or because of prejudice in no way a part of the ruling law of our land. Born free citizens, or acquiring the right through naturalization, we have full freedom of action without infringement upon the rights of others. Okay, that's critical. Where someone else's rights start, yours end. To reside or travel at home or abroad under the protection and with all privileges accorded by our government, regardless of race, color, religion, or social station. That is your inheritance, being born in America. Full opportunity is here given to every citizen to work out his own ideals and ideas. To the native born, this privilege is accepted as a matter of no great significance. That's sad, right? But it's true. For he is wholly unfamiliar with the laws, traditions, and customs that direct and restrict individual action of citizens in foreign countries. My dad was military, and so I've been all over the northern hemisphere every 3 years we moved. I've been to Turkey, Germany, you name it, I've been there. And this statement is more true than anything that can be said. Those who are native born have no idea what level of freedom we have. They have no idea the privileges that are truly given to them. If you could go to these other nations and see what they are dealing with, you would begin to understand the level of privilege that you have, having been born in America. The American citizen frequently changes his occupation. His very liberty keeps him on the alert for an opportunity to better his financial and or social status. The change is one of occupation, not of personality. His pride and self-respect are not involved in any way, form, or fashion. That is a true American citizen. Religious liberty. No greater liberty was ever conferred on a people than that of freedom to worship according to the dictates of one's own conscience, rather than being told by the priest or being told by the government or the church or what have you, but the dictates of one's own conscience. The First Amendment to the Constitution declares that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibit the free exercise thereof. Now, people completely and utterly misunderstand this power and the meanings behind it, but it's covered right here, and we're going to cover it. All persons have the privilege to entertain any religious belief, practice any religious rite, teach any religious doctrine which is not subversive of morality, and does not interfere with personal rights of others. So if your religion requires you to go and kidnap a child, traffic that child, and then sacrifice that child, you have stepped all over the personal rights of others, those who own that child, whom God gave that child to through the birth canal. So there are limitations, and this is what people do not comprehend. However, this liberty cannot be invoked as a protection against legislation for the punishment of acts inimical to the peace, good order, and morals of society, because professed doctrines of religious beliefs are not superior to the laws of the land. No person is permitted to become a law unto themselves. Right? Rules for thee, not for me. Laws unto themselves. Nor may he, in the name of religion or through a religious ceremony, violate the law. So, in the name of religion or the name of your religious ceremony, you still do not have a right to break the law that says you cannot murder. Okay? So there are limitations on this. Religious liberty does not include the right to introduce and carry out every scheme or purpose which persons see fit to claim as a part of their religious system. While there is no legal authority to constrain belief, no one can lawfully stretch his own liberty of action so as to interfere with that of his neighbors or violate peace or good order. That's the United States Supreme Court. Laws are made for the government of actions, and while they cannot interfere with mere religious beliefs and opinions, they may with the practices of religion. Again, you have this religious freedom, but only in as much as that you do not violate the essential laws of society. Okay, so if you start murdering people, you are breaking the essential laws that are required for any given community. And if you do that, your religious freedom, your religious practice does not free you from that law. So you still are constrained by law, even though you do have religious freedom. Okay? But on the other side of this, your religious freedom prevents anyone from having the right to take away the breathing of the breath of life, right? The air, through a mask or some other mandated thing. They can't do that. They don't have the right or the power to do that. Separation of church and state. The separation of church and state is a fundamental principle of American government. Neither church nor state is permitted to dictate to or exercise power over the other. In no other way can religious liberty be preserved. Religion and national defense. There is no place for the doctrine of non-cooperation. Religious beliefs will not excuse any citizen from rendering service in the defense of the country, although Congress has power at its discretion to exempt him. Defense of his country. Now this could be anything from defending this country against evil or an aggressive nation, or it can be defense of the country can be something as simple as holding a person in office accountable. Because if you don't defend against these things, then evil is going to move in, and once evil moves in, it's very difficult to get rid of, because what evil does when it comes in is it begins the process of demoralization and changing of the minds of men, to change their education up so that they don't know who they are and what they stand for and their power and responsibilities and duties, so that they themselves can do whatever the heck they want to do and get away with it. Freedom of speech and press. Pause it if you want to read that, guys. I'm going to skip it and we're going to move down a little ways. We're already almost an hour into this video. So propaganda. Propaganda floods our country from every conceivable source. Okay? This is in 1920. Propaganda floods our country from every conceivable source. Active and vociferous agencies have been organized for the express purpose of advancing doctrines absolutely not in accord with the fixed principles of our nation. In the most persistent manner, they seek to tear down rather than build, to destroy rather than improve. One of the most subtly dangerous features is that it is so camouflaged as to make it appear to have an innocent purpose. So they take over the news agencies, right? And it looks legit. It looks like, hey, man, they're providing the news, they're keeping us educated, they're keeping us up to date on all these things. But in reality, what it is propaganda, controlling the narrative, controlling the minds of men. But understand that if you do not know what the principles of our nation are, then you cannot see when propaganda is at work. Okay, let's back up again. Propaganda floods our country from every conceivable source. Active and vociferous agencies have been organized for the express purpose of advancing doctrines absolutely not in accord with the fixed principles of our nation. Not in accord with the fixed principles of our nation. So if you don't know what the fixed principles of our nation are, which you now pretty much do from going through this document, then you cannot see when propaganda is at work. And if you can't see when propaganda is at work, you're going to fall for that propaganda because it's disguised and camouflaged in such a way as to be an innocent appearance, to have an innocent purpose. Okay, so to prevent such activities during the World War, Congress found it necessary to pass the Espionage Act of 1917 for the safety of the state and the successful outcome of the struggle. We carefully supervise, listen to this, we carefully supervise every agency whose business may in any degree affect the physical health of our people. Equal care should be exercised over all agencies which in any manner may affect our social, economic, or political life. You should always be on guard, always be looking for propaganda, always be looking for these infiltrations, and when you see them, begin to hold them accountable. Or at the very, very least, if you're not capable of holding them accountable, at the very least, inform the American public as to what they are doing. Expose them. Restriction of abuses. There is no law in any state or nation that prohibits freedom of speech or press, but there are laws against the abuse of this right. Restrictions may be necessary for the preservation of public order and the protection of the state. While Congress is forbidden by the Constitution to abridge the freedom of speech or the press, the punishment of those who violate every principle of loyalty and patriotism modifies in no manner the constitutional provision. The law punishes because of the crime against the country and its citizens. So when you come in here and you start to replace the ideals that are in the American mind with your propaganda, or the principles with your principles, and all these other things, the law punishes because you are affecting this country and its citizens, which have principles and ideals that made this nation great. The First Amendment cannot have been, and obviously was not, intended to give immunity for every possible use of language. That was Justice Holmes. Blackstone's maxims, so maxims of laws here, which help to interpret the present limitation on speech and press. Between public and private rights, the public rights must prevail, right? For the public good is more important than the individual right. Again, where somebody else's rights start, yours end. So public right is more important than individual right or private right. Okay, not individual right, private right. Number 2, liberty to all but preference to none. Those offenses should be most severely punished which are most difficult to guard against. They should have the highest consequence because they're the most difficult to guard against those. And so when we do catch it, and then they should have the highest degree of punishment. Economic liberty, property rights safeguarded. Under no other government are property rights of the individual so provided with safeguards for their full protection. Property is at the base of civilization. Without incentive of right to its private possession and full protection against confiscation, no progress would be made in material betterment. There would be no advancement in any given nation if you did not have this protection, if you did not have this basic economic liberty. Economic liberty, the power of initiative, and the protection of property rights have developed a philosophy of life peculiar to America, the dignity of work. Every American is expected to be a worker. People don't want to hear that, especially the generation coming up. They don't want to hear that, but it's because they're uneducated. They need to be a worker. That's what keeps civilization moving forward. That's what keeps advancements moving forward. That's what keeps things going in the right direction. Based upon the constitutional assurance of the security of property, finance, and labor, have joined in the creation of industry, making America the richest nation in the world. Now, we aren't the richest nation in the world anymore. We're in debt and all these other things. The richest nation in the world is the Vatican. Her wealth has been distributed to the enrichment of her entire population, and that was in fact true back then. So, political liberty, which is equal participation in the government, okay? The list of public office holders in city, state, and nation reveals the measure of political liberty granted in America. There are found representatives of practically every race in the world. They have been elected by the people as their able and honorable representatives. When you go to elect somebody into a public office, you need to know if they are able, number one, and if they are honorable. And if they are not able and honorable both, do not allow them to represent you. It's that simple. But that is critically important. And so if the people don't educate themselves and those candidates that are running for any given office before they actually go to cast, then they are just willy-nilly voting and allowing evil or any other thing to come in because they don't know what they just elected into office. This is important. People have got to learn to investigate those who are running. Every citizen enjoys the protection and benefits of our municipal, state, and national governments. Any suggestion of racial or religious differences is frowned upon. It is the sincere wish of the majority that tolerance and understanding weld our people of all nationalities into a social, economic, and political unity for the purpose of developing a strong national character and a race of men and women whose ideals and attainments shall be an inspiration and help to the peoples of all the earth. The greatest degree of political liberty is secured by wise laws properly enforced. Anarchy destroys liberty because it is lawlessness and confusion, that's chaos, and utter disregard of all government. This is why they wanted to defund the police and do all of these criminal activities. Your police are enforcing the policy of the incorporation of whatever town, city you live in. They're just enforcing policy. Now, if this enforcement is not what you want, then you need to attend your city meeting, or your town meeting, or your county meeting, or whatever the situation you find yourself in, and begin the process of trying to get that law changed. Okay? But understand that there are essential laws and that all that the police are doing are enforcing the policies that the people have agreed upon. If the people don't go to those meetings and oppose that law, then it is assumed that the people are okay with that law. Okay? You have a duty and a responsibility. And if you don't participate in your duties and responsibilities, and then you get all these laws and all these things in effect that are taking away your rights and liberties and such, whose fault is it? It's yours and yours alone because you refuse to do your job, your responsibility and the duty to God, having been born in America. where he put you in charge of law enforcement and making sure that whatever it is that you want, you have a voice in that. You have the liberty to speak up and to participate. Safeguard to our liberties. By clinging to the ideas and ideals which animated the frames of the Declaration of Independence, we can assure not only peace within, but national security and respect from other nations. Trump was very big on that. When we fail to adequately comprehend the principles incident to our government, its fundamental ideals, which have made our government, the United States of America, faces anarchy and destruction. Okay? Now, once this thing was forced out in the light, you can see this anarchy and this process of destruction that has been going on behind the scenes for all of these years. So until it was forced out, you couldn't see these things. Number one, because we weren't educated and we didn't understand and we didn't know what American citizenry even meant or anything else. We were never taught these things. But today you are seeing a dedicated effort to anarchy and the destruction of this great republic. Let our object be our country, our whole country, and nothing but our country. And by the blessing of God, may that country itself become a vast and splendid monument, not of oppression and terror, but of wisdom, of peace, and of liberty, upon which the world may gaze with admiration forever. Daniel Webster. Alright, so we're going to go into this progress of government, and then the government by autocracy and a government of law. What did Donald always tell everybody? Law and order. Law and order. Okay? There's autocracy, and then there's a government of law and order. So the progress of government in the beginning of human history, with needs and wants limited to food and shelter, man's dominating impulse was the preservation of life. His social instinct led to the establishment of families, groups, and tribes, transmitting habits, traditions, customs, and superstitions to succeeding generations. There came to be formed definite and distinctive racial types with fixed governing principles. Governments of a kind were set up, order was created, but with accumulation of property and increasing wants, conflicts occurred, the strong despoiling the weak, Alliances for defense and offense were formed. Agreements between rulers and subjects and forms of treaties with nations brought about a more or less defined code of conduct and law, invariably enforced to the benefit of those who held the power, not to the people. So government by autocracy. Selfish and often cruel leaders preyed upon the weak and ignorant in the accomplishment of their ambitious designs. Autocracy held power through appeal to the emotions engendered by pomp and glitter of the court, or by fear created through control of military forces and the means of livelihood. By various methods, the rights of citizenship were confined to the prescribed limits dedicated by will or by force, until increasing intelligence within the ranks of the people began to exert a counteracting influence. The historical development of the ancient liberties of the English people establishing individual rights began with the meeting of King John and the barons on the field of Runnymede, I'm not sure how you say that, in 1215 AD, where the Magna Carta was signed, which guaranteed rights beyond, okay, for those of you that don't know about Magna Carta, guaranteed rights beyond the power of the king to take away. That's what the Magna Carta did, and that was the beginning process of mankind actually having rights that the kingships or the monarchies or the dictatorships could not take away, because it was written down. By successive steps in protection of these rights came the Act of Parliament in 1295, Petition of Rights in 1628, Habeas Corpus Act in 1679, and the Bill of Rights in 1689, and the Act of Settlement in 1701. These liberties did not originate with charters, but were simply confirmed by them and made the, quote, fixed principles of freedom, end quote. These liberties did not originate with charters, but were simply confirmed by them and made the fixed principles of freedom. So they were already existent, but then when these charters were formed, it made it viable. It made it apparent. It made it something that you can't say that it doesn't because it's written down right here in this charter. Okay? Restrictions of government on the life of the people created caste, favoritism, and taxation became oppressive, and man left Europe and came to America. So, government of laws. Until the adoption of the Constitution, government was imposed by the will of the minority and enforced by absolute control of economic institution and military forces. Under the Constitution, a government of laws and not of men was formulated out of the experiences of the centuries in which feudalism, despotism, and autocracy had given form to the ruling forces of government. And when you had these feudalisms, despotisms, and autocracies, these were governments of men. Same with the Roman Empire, same with the Greek Empire, same with the Medo-Persian Empire, same with the Babylonian Empire, right? Governments of men. The Constitution created a government of laws and not of men. Sources of the Constitution. The underlying principles of the Constitution, which you should know and familiarize yourselves with, were not formulated in a day. The three great American charters of liberty contained the fundamental principles of American government. Bill for establishing religious freedom in Virginia, Virginia Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence. Before the Constitutional Convention met in Philadelphia, many plans and suggestions were drafted and presented to the convention. In addition to this careful preparation, after more than a century of self-government, there were in the convention men of extraordinary natural ability and wide experience like Washington, Franklin, and Hamilton. There were men who had studied law at the Inner Temple in London, who had been in... I think I messed up on the recording there. I'm not sure where I left off, so we're coming back up here. You can come read this for yourself if I didn't cover it, but the purpose of government, a correct understanding of the purpose of government furnishes a remedy for erroneous and dangerous ideas threatening the country. That's what we deal with today. Erroneous and dangerous ideas that are threatening this country. Government is instituted for the common benefit. That's the only reason it exists. For the common benefit, maintaining order and protecting life, liberty, and property. When you read what Blackstone says, to secure liberty is the main business of government and the reason for their institution. So the only reason they were brought forth or brought into existence, any form of government, is to secure liberty, right? And to protect life, liberty, and property and the common benefit of all while maintaining order. That's the purpose and point of government. And when you begin to understand that the only reason that we the people established government was to maintain our common benefits and maintain order as well as protecting life, liberty, and property, then you begin to see that once we created it, it became our responsibility and our duty to hold them accountable that they would continue these things, protecting life, liberty, property, maintaining order, and the common benefit of all people. And when they move outside of that, it is our job and duty to hold them accountable for what they are attempting to do, which is outside of their legal authority to do so, or their lawful power to do so. Paternalism. The paternalism of communism, which provides both property and substance for the individual, is not a proper function of government. It results only in individual irresponsibility. So when you become dependent upon government, and government is providing what you are depending upon, government has gotten out of order. Self-government, self-reliance. So why do you lean on the government? And why would the government provide you with anything? All that does is take away individual responsibility and makes them irresponsible people that depend upon government. which means they are completely and utterly uneducated. The preamble to the Constitution. The preamble to the Constitution is a most accurate and comprehensive statement of the purpose of government. It explicitly sets forth the fundamental purpose for which government is primarily organized. The brevity, simplicity, and directness of its original draft, after 150 years of experience, require no changes. We the people. The convention, which met in Philadelphia in 1787, adopted a constitution based upon the proposition that a people are able to govern themselves. Understand that the proposition that they were using in order to form this government was the idea that a people are able to govern themselves. They don't need a government to govern them. They are able to govern themselves, and we are just going to establish the government to guarantee to us our life, liberties, properties, common good, common welfare, and order. Under the Articles of Confederation, the state assumed control. A single state might exercise veto power over the will of all the others. In the government set up under the new Constitution, the power and rights of the people are the source and final authority. The power and rights of the people are the source and final authority. It derives its just powers from the consent of the governed. For the first time in human history, the people assumed control and government became subject to their will. This government in this America, this land of the free, is unlike any other government on earth. This is why the whole world is looking to the Americans to see what we do, and whether this nation falls, bringing the entire world down with it, or stands and opposes and brings down the evil and wicked once and for all. Nowhere is American independence and self-reliance better exemplified than in the words, "we the people." The people, the highest authority known to our system, from whom all our institutions spring, okay? The people, you and I, the regular people, and the capital letter P people, those people in office in the states, the lawful persons, are the ones that sprung forth the various different institutions. The state government, the federal servant, the federal government is the corporate people establishing a union of all of the lawful persons. It's still we the people, just the corporate version of us. Remember, soil and land jurisdiction are one and the same thing. Soil is just completely and utterly removing yourself from citizenry and just being completely separated literally unto God. Like, you have nothing to do with government, nothing to do with anything. You can't hold them accountable. You can't stand for justice. You can't do anything. You're just there. You've removed yourself from citizenry. You've removed yourself from interacting with the government and participating in making this a great nation and standing for liberty and justice and the rights of people and humanity, mankind as a whole. But again, for certain people in certain situations that they're finding themselves in, state national is the route that they need to go. But again, this is something you have to decide for yourself, and then you have the process of educating yourself to the point that you fully and completely and utterly understand it. Then do what you need to do. But again, no divisions here, guys. If that's what you want to do, then then go do that. But for the vast majority of people out there, they're going to want to help fix this nation and bring this nation back to its ideals, back to its principles, back to its founding, back to the truth. But the institution sprung up from we the people. The people, the highest authority known to our system, from whom, the people, all our institutions spring, and upon whom they depend, formed it. Who formed it? The people. That which you create, you control. Individual rights. Its language, we the people, is the institution of one great consolidated national government of the people of all the states, instead of a government by compact with the states for its agents. So rather than having a centralized controlling monarchy or kingship or dictatorship or whatever, we have a centralized government, very limited in scope and powers delegated to them, with the states underneath them that are in union in that compact of the United States to keep things uniform and to create the essential laws required to maintain societies and all these other things, so that there's uniformity among the states, with all political power residing in the people. Completely and utterly different than any other nation on earth. See, in the other states, you have a centralized nation with independent with independent states or colonies or commonwealths or whatever, but the national government controls and dictates to the states what the states can do, and then the states control and dictate what the people can do. Completely different than what we have in America. A more perfect union. In the original Federation, the states were but loosely joined. The Constitution was a demand for more effective control of the Union by the government itself. In the efficacy and permanency of your Union, a government for the whole is indispensable. You have improved upon your first essay, Articles of Confederation, by the adoption of a Constitution of Government for the efficacious management of your common concerns. Indignantly frowned upon the first drawing of every attempt to alienate any portion of our country from the rest of, or to enfeeble the sacred ties which now link together the various parts. So, I mean, prior to all of this, when you had the Articles of Confederation, you had this looseness, this kind of a chaotic state where each state was basically battling against the other state, trying to be better than the other state. You had this constant, like, battling going on between the different states of the Union, and none of them wanted to put the money up that they were supposed to be putting into the central government and all of these different types of things. And so what Washington is saying is that we went from that craziness that was going on under the Confederation, which basically was causing this nation to fall, causing it to collapse under its own stupidity, literally, and made and established a actual union of all of these states with this limited amount of power. But that limited 19 powers, whatever those 19 powers accomplish, is uniform amongst all of these states, interconnecting them, unifying them for the common good of all. So basically going from a state of chaos to a state of order, in which you have each state that are unified in certain aspects, and those certain aspects are these 19 powers. So the laws that Congress comes out with that concerns those 19 powers is unified amongst all of the states. And so now you are sacredly all tied together. All 48 states at the time, 50 states of the Union now, are tied together in uniformity, and there's no chaos involved anymore. And the sacred ties keep everyone bound together. What's the sacred ties? Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, one nation under God, right? You do your part. You learn to self-discipline and learn to self-govern govern yourself and your family, and etc. And as we build all of these things, this sacred tie is what holds all of these states together, and they have a common purpose to uphold the rights of each individual, as well as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and stands for justice, liberty, and justice. That's what I'm trying to say. This is what the Constitution actually accomplished. That was Washington in his farewell address. Now, here's the Lincoln part, okay? In the course of the Civil War, remember how these people work. These Revelation 2939 people work. What do? They create the problem, then there's a reaction, and then there's a solution that they bring. In the course of the Civil War, the Southern states sought to dissolve our Union. President Lincoln sought to preserve our Union. The states have their status in the Union, and they have no other legal status. The Union, and not themselves separately, procured their independence and liberty. The Union is older than any of the states and, in fact, created them as states. Abraham Lincoln, Message to Congress, July 4th, 1861. Now, that's a statement from Lincoln, okay? Now, I disagree with what he's saying here. The Union, he's saying that the Union procured the independence and liberty. There was no Union. You had colonies, 13 colonies of a British Empire. These 13 colonies say that they are free and independent states, not a union. Okay? So just because Lincoln is quoted saying that does not mean that that's accurate. And that's what I was trying to tell you at the beginning of this document. In my opinion, okay, TJ's opinion, that this is a whitehead operation taking place all the way back right directly after we were taken over. So you have you have this training manual. They know what's being taught in the school system, that Lincoln is the hero and all of this stuff, and there's no way you can explain to people that they bring the problem and then they know what the reaction is going to be because they've already tested it, and then after the people react, after the war, they bring the solution through Lincoln, right? So they set up the situation, create a division between the North and the South, then they insert their individual into office as well as the right people in the Congress so they can get the laws passed and then executed, and then the reaction takes place among the people, and then they bring in that solution. So it says that the Union is older than any of the states and in fact created them as states. No, there was 13 colonies that declared their independence, that they were free and independent states. States are nations. Okay? It did not say that that these 13 colonies are free and now a union of states. It just says that they are free and independent states. Okay? So again, they're using that to show you the power. They're putting it in the training manual to show you the power of bringing this union together, even though it's an inaccurate statement. That the union is in no way older than the states. The union comes later. The right of succession was forever settled by the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which declares all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. The national government is not an assemblage of states, but of individuals. So when we come up here, this is confusing, right? Because it appears as though the states have no sovereignty, they're not free and independent and all these other things based on what Lincoln's telling us here, right? The states have their status in the Union, and they have no other legal status. Yes, they do. We'll see that here in just a minute. The Union, and not themselves separately, procured their independence and liberty, right? And then he goes on to say some things. That's what the stars are for. The Union is older than any of the states, and in fact created them as states. That is not true. The people created the states. Now, after the Union was established, various different states came into the Union and were created after the Union was created, and wasn't and therefore are part of that Union in effect established by the Union. Okay, but it was still established by the people, and they are still free sovereign nations in and of themselves. Let's go on down here. To refuse allegiance to the United States is to be a traitor to the nation. Now stop. So if you say that you are not a U.S. citizen and you don't checkmark U.S. citizen on that, say you're registering to vote in your state, right? The registration form is going to require you to be both a citizen of your state and a citizen of the United States. Why? Because we are in union with all of the other states. Okay? Now, what they do is they make presumptions and assumptions, and this is, we have this British territorial government, this Roman municipal government. Like I said, completely and utterly forget about all that, because it's vitiated already. Just by the simple fact there was no disclosure, no ability to properly contract, and every part of a contract was completely avoided. And we end up in a contract that we have absolutely nothing to do with. We were just born and don't even have the ability to know what a word means yet. But if you want to say that you're a state national and you remove yourself from being a citizen of the state and a citizen of the United States, or a United States citizen, then you are literally a traitor to the United States. Why? Because we created the states for our mutual protection. The states created the United States for their mutual protection. All of this is a massive, massive cooperation governed by we the people. But if you refuse to be a citizen of your state, you're a traitor to your state. If you refuse to be a citizen to the United States, you are a traitor to the United States, because you have refused to be a part of this massive cooperation, and instead have become selfish and unto yourself to live your life the way you want to live it, apart from society. Now, I am not saying that society is right in what they do nowadays. I am not saying that the laws are right the way they are nowadays. But what I'm saying is, in order to fix any of this, you must be a citizen, at the very least, of your state. But you should also be a citizen of the United States, because only as a citizen do you have the ability to do law enforcement against those in office who swore an oath to the Constitution of the state and to the United States. And so if you separate and you remove yourself from that, then you have accomplished what the Revelation 2939 people have set out to do, which is to get you to stop participating in your government of liberty and justice, the shining light on a hill. Let's continue to read here. However, in the dual capacity of citizenship, we render service as citizens of both the state in which we hold legal residence and the United States. Each of our 48 states retain its own sovereignty in all matters relating exclusively to state affairs. See, the states are absolutely free and independent sovereign nations in and of themselves. Okay? Now, when it comes to national things, the U.S. Constitution reigns supreme. When it comes to state affairs, the state's constitution reigns supreme. But when it has to do with uniformity, or international or interstate commerce, or postal, or any of these things which are on a national level, the states do not have the authority. Those 19 powers were delegated to the United States from all of the 48 states, 50 states today, back then 48 states. So the 48 states let go of those delegated powers and handed them off to the United States in order to keep everything in uniformity and to have the quote-unquote essential laws and nothing more than those essential laws. Now, again, all that's been corrupted ever since then, and we got all these errors and all these things, but it comes down to the fact that the people are uneducated, and since the people are uneducated, they're not doing their law enforcement. Since they're not doing their law enforcement, evil, this organized criminality is doing whatever the heck it wants to do. So it comes back down to the core of it, a lack of education. So each of our 48 states retains its own sovereignty in all matters relating exclusively to state affairs, in which it is protected by its own constitution. In all interests, national or international affairs, both the citizen and the state owe allegiance to the Union. This is why you become a traitor of the United States if you are not a citizen of the United States and yet consider yourself an American. And again, if you are not a state citizen and a United States citizen, then you don't really have the ability to keep government in check, to enforce the Constitution against them, to hold them accountable for the oath that they swore to uphold. A state national is neither a U.S. citizen nor a state citizen. They are all by themselves. You are an American citizen as a state national. You are an American citizen as a state citizen. You are an American citizen as a national or United States citizen, or a citizen of the United States. You are still an American citizen. No matter which area you place yourself in, which jurisdiction, you are still an American citizen. So the problem with states, with a state national is that basically what you're doing is you're saying, I'm an American citizen, but I'm not going to participate in America, in upholding a just government. Instead, I'm just going to allow them to do whatever they want to do. I'm not going to participate in holding them accountable. I'm just going to remove myself from it and just do my thing. Selfishness is what it comes down to. Now again, like I said, there are situations, they're very few, but there are, that people have gotten themselves into where they do in fact need to become a state national for a period of time, get everything worked out, and then acclimate themselves back into being a citizen. But that's on a personal level and between you and God, and you need to work it out and get the education before you make your decisions, and then do what you need to do. For the rest of the people, it's mainly either you're going to consider you should be both a state citizen and a United States citizen, irregardless of the British territorial government and Roman municipal government. None of that matters. It's all vitiated. Okay? What you have to do is hold them accountable. It's your responsibility and it's your duty if you were born in America. It's part of your inheritance. In all interstate, national, or international affairs, both the citizen and the state owe allegiance to the Union, because it's the Union that keeps the interstate and national and international affairs unified, in unison, and operating properly for the benefit of all. Okay? Again, when it gets out of its role and responsibility, when it decides not to uphold liberty and pursuit of happiness and justice and all these things, then the people, either the states themselves have to oppose the laws trying to be pushed out, or the people themselves have got to get to a point of non-compliance and not participate and send notices and affidavits and instruct their representatives in what the law says and get their act straight or face consequences. Justice. Our government asserts justice in that it is a government of laws, not of men. It's not of kings and monarchies and rulers and dictators. It is a government of laws that have been written down and established. In the heat of passion or sectional interest, in clashes between groups or questions of policy, no minority or bloc may enforce its will. Should a majority seek to injure the rights of an individual citizen, the power of veto resting in the President or the power of the Supreme Court as an unbiased tribunal will insist that justice be done. So what happens when your justice system or your president is evil, wicked, and criminalized? Okay? It comes back to the people holding their authority. But if the people ain't holding the authority, then this will never work. Should a majority seek, mob rule, seek to injure the rights of an individual, a single individual. The government is there to uphold your individual rights. Individually. It's there to uphold you, the one listening to me with the 2 ears, hearing my voice. Government exists to uphold your rights, individually, as well as collectively all of our rights. But when a mob seeks to democracy, mob, whatever, to injure the rights of an individual citizen, the power of veto resting in the President or the power of the Supreme Court as an unbiased tribunal will insist that justice be done. A series of checks and balances which prevent the selfish interest of either individuals or groups from exercising their will to the injustice of another is provided by the Constitution. This is why they had to come in, infiltrate with bringing in immoralities and get you to slowly, gradually boil the frog to its death. They had to gradually, behind the scenes, they couldn't be in the light, they couldn't be seen. They had to infiltrate and then in the shadows do all of these operations in order to form this one world government and to keep this one world government running. They had to maintain darkness. They had to keep it in shadows. This is why the letter operation, the Trump administration, etc., wanted to force this thing out into the light, because it being in the light is its very destruction. It will destroy its own self if it's forced out into the light. The people become aware, the people see it, and the people will refuse to allow it to continue. Wherever there is an interest in power to do wrong, wrong will generally be done, and not less readily by a powerful and interested party than by a powerful and interested prince. James Madison. In questions of power, then, let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief to the chains of the Constitution. That's your job, that's your duty, that's your responsibility if you were blessed to be born in America, is to bind them down in the chains of the Constitution. You hold them accountable to what they swore an oath to uphold. So then you get the domestic tranquility in the preamble of the Constitution. It says at the conclusion of the Revolutionary War, the colonial states were bankrupt. Foreign credit was exhausted and could not be reestablished until a responsible central government was created. Soldiers remained unpaid long after the war was ended. Colonies quarreled with each other over duties imposed upon the goods sold or bartered. Chaos and anarchy, disillusion and despair prevailed, all because of lack of proper organization and power in government. So domestic tranquility requires a measure of enforced responsibility, mutual faith, and harmonious and prosperous conditions. These are provided under the Constitution through the powers conferred upon the national government regulating interstate affairs, making interchange of commodities, communication, transportation, and freedom of residence, occupation, and industrial equal to all. Domestic tranquility is further assured by religious freedom, free speech, and free press, thereby establishing interchange of thought, which results in the creation of a national public opinion and brings within its influence every citizen regardless of race, religion, financial condition, or social qualification. Again, decentralized government is established for all of these things and more. Okay? So interchange of commodities, communication, transports, regulating interstate affairs, freedom of residence, all these things. And then the common defense, a country worth fighting for to establish was worth fighting for to preserve. And it still is worth fighting for to preserve. Today we fight with a pen, not with weapons, because we are the ultimate authority, we the people, and we have individual rights that these governments are supposed to be upholding. Okay, and then it goes into the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8. But attention is especially called to the limited period of 2 years as the length of time to be covered by any appropriation of money for the military forces. Without the consent of the people, and how is that consent conveyed? Through their representatives in Congress, any army created would fall to pieces for lack of funds. A great deal is said about the effort to militarize America through carrying out the provisions of the National Defense Act of 1920. This act was created by the people, for the people, to be paid for by the people. It can be killed by repeal or by refusal to make necessary appropriations. In the last analysis, the people of the military force of the United States, their employees, the regular Army, National Guard, and organized reserves, are working for them and in absolute obedience to rules and regulations laid down by their agent, the Congress. Okay? Who's our agent? Congress. Congress is the agent of who? We, the people. See, when you understand the United States Constitution, you understand that the Congress is split into two things. You have the Senate, which is there to represent the state. And then you have the House of Representatives. They are called the House of Representatives because they are representing the people. And so the House of Representatives are the agent of the people. So if the House of Representatives are passing laws which are contrary to the United States Constitution or your individual rights, then because they are your agent, you can hold them accountable. You must understand how this entire system is set up. And this is what I mean by that we have a lack of education and that we have an extraordinarily massive task ahead of us. And we genuinely need God's help. You should be praying for the Supreme Court decision that they're doing with Roe versus Wade, And then you also need to be praying for God to educate the people, to awaken the people to their need for education, and to cause them to seek out the truth so that we can all become educated. And when we all are educated and united under God, then we have, through the power of the pen, the ability to put government back where it is supposed to be. But if you don't understand that these things, that what Congress is, and that when they create an act, they are doing it on our behalf. And if we disagree with what they are doing, then we need to write to them. We need to send them a notice. We need to instruct them in what the law says and how they are attacking our rights in making that law, and educate them. And then give them the opportunity to fix it. And then if they don't, then you got to send affidavits, and you got to swear that this is how it is under penalty of perjury. And you better know what you're talking about, because it's under penalty of perjury. Anyway, what I want you to look at, remember, you are under a militarized government until the people return to self-government. Okay? So, reread this section right here. I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to blur it in. I'm going to focus in on it. Read it, pause the video, read it, and reread it until you understand that he is telling you right here, in TJ's opinion, in Jed's opinion, that this White Hat operation is telling you right here how to utterly fix the solution. But so pause it and read it until you get it. We're going to move on. To secure the, quote, blessings of liberty was the fundamental purpose of the makers of the Constitution and its subsequent adoption. They include all the rights and privileges that a citizen of this country enjoys. A voice in the government. That's your privilege, is that you do have a voice in the government. Freedom to worship according to the dictates of the individual conscience, freedom of speech and of the press, the lack of restriction upon all inherent individual rights. The liberty of America is not that which permits the individual citizen to do as he pleases. He may, so long as he does not interfere with the liberty of others. The liberty of the individual ends where the rights of others begin. I have stated this several times. The liberty of the individual ends where the rights of others begin. Your rights are your rights until you interfere with somebody else's rights. We all declare for liberty, but in using the word we do not all mean the same thing. With some, the word liberty may mean for each man to do as he pleases with himself and the product of his labor, while with others the same word may mean for some men to do as they please with other men and the product of other men's labor. Here are two not only different but incompatible things called by the same name, liberty. And it follows that each of the things is by the respective parties called by two different and incompatible names, liberty and tyranny. The shepherd drives the wolf from the sheep's throat, for which the sheep thanks the shepherd as his liberator, while the wolf denounces him for the same act as the destroyer of liberty. Abraham Lincoln said all of that. The blessing which the citizen enjoys under our form of government are secured through liberty under law. Liberty under law. The enforcement of which is their only safeguard. The purpose of the government, again, here's another purpose of government, is to protect, not to provide, the property of its citizens. To guard his person, not to provide his substance, while he acquires the means of livelihood, to give every citizen equal opportunity in his chosen work and assure him of equal standing before the law. Our government is the most nearly perfect of all in securing individual rights and ensuring the blessings of liberty. In no other nation is equal opportunity and equal protection assured, with such equal division of reward for labor and services rendered. Okay, so here we're going to move into the American philosophy of government. You need to understand this and internalize it. So, the American philosophy of government emphasizes that individual rights are sacred and it is necessary to establish a government in the protection of these rights. That's why we have government. That's why we form government, is to establish a protection of our individual rights. All the powers of governments are derived from the people, who retain the supreme authority over all delegated powers of government. Who has supreme authority? Government? No. We the people. You and I. Individuals. 3. Individual rights are not permitted to be exercised in the contravention of the rights of society. Individual liberty is always bounded by social obligations. In other words, your rights can't interfere with the rights of others. Government is exercised for the purpose of protecting the individual in his rights. Government powers are delegated to the national, state, or local authority and are limited in their exercise by provisions of the Constitution as interpreted and defined by the Supreme Court. By the way, when it comes to Supreme Courts, justices do not determine law, and they do not interpret law. They give opinions. Very important to understand the difference. In other nations like Great Britain, they interpret law, and court decisions influence law. In the United States, the justices give opinions, period. Government powers are delegated to national, state, or local authority and are limited in their exercise by provisions of the Constitution as interpreted and defined by the Supreme Court. All rights not thus delegated are recognized as the inviolable right of the individual citizen and cannot be usurped by any governmental power. Okay? All rights not thus delegated. Okay? We took some of our rights and delegated those powers to the state. The state then took some of their rights, which has to do with interstate and international commerce and all these other things, and delegated that to the United States so that we have a union of all of the states for the mutual protection, welfare, and protection of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, etc. The government of the United States is not a democracy, but a republic. Okay? It is not a democracy. It is a republic. Alright, there's a few things I want to cover in this section, and then we're going to end this video, and starting in the next video, we're going to start to walk into the solutions. Okay? We're going to leave this document behind. I know it's taken a long time to get through this document, but I would highly recommend that you come read every single word in this document. Okay? I highly recommend it. Like I said, do a search for Training Manual 2000, it's right here, 2000-25. Okay, and then put Training Manual 2000-25 PDF, and you'll find it. You'll find it on the internet. If not, it's on. I have it posted on the Telegram account now. Every single American should read the entirety of this document. So until the 18th century, the world had little experience with republics. In the ancient world, Greece and Rome furnished early examples of attempts to form democratic governments. In Grecian cities, popular government was practiced, the free people directly making the laws. In Rome, the townsman passed laws to his own advantage, and in the so-called Venetian Republic, the power was vested in a few nobles. After the failure of many experiments in free government, the ancient world turned to monarchy, believing that the people were unfit to govern themselves. For centuries, political revolutions were struggles for better government rather than self-government. At the time of the Revolutionary War, the republican form of government was discredited throughout the world, monarchy and oligarchy being considered the proper forms of good government. Representative government, the American experiment. A few races qualified themselves for self-government. To establish that form of government was a long, hard struggle which culminated in the great American experiment. The United States set up a distinct and different form of government, the product of distinct racial stock and centuries spent in learning the principles and art of self-government. In practice, our form of government is the most nearly perfect in securing individual rights and ensuring the blessings of liberty. It differs from previous forms. It differs from previous forms in certain vital and fundamental principles, which have come to be known as American institutions. Among these is that of self-government by representation, which is the golden mean between autocracy and democracy. This is why we can very easily slip right into democracy and then into socialism and then into communism. The following comparative analysis shows the principal characteristics of the three forms of government. So in autocracy, authority is derived through heredity. You're born into it. People have no choice in the selection of their rulers and no voice in making of the laws. Results in arbitrariness, tyranny, and oppression. Attitude toward property is feudalistic. Attitude toward law is that the will of the ruler shall control regardless of reason or consequences. A democracy, a government of the masses. Authority derived through mass meeting or any other form of, quote, direct expression. Results in mobocracy. Okay, mobocracy or mob rule. Attitude toward property is communistic, negating property rights. Attitude toward law is that the will of the majority shall regulate, whether it be based upon deliberation or governed by passion, prejudice, and impulse without restraint or regard to the consequences. Results in demagogism, license, agitation, discontent, and ultimately into anarchy. Republic. Authority is derived through the election by the people of public officials best fitted to represent them. Best fitted. In other words, you look through all the people that are running, and you take each individual candidate, and you research who are they, what is their character, what are their ideals, what are their principles, who are these people, what is their past, what are they doing, etc., etc., etc. And from that you find that which is best fitted to represent you. This is why I am voting for Huffington for governor of Texas, not Abbott. Abbott showed exactly who he was when this event took place. And he locked down our economy. He shut the economy down, shut down churches, forced mask wearing, and all these other things. He showed his fruit before his time for re-election came up. Ever since this time of re-election, he's been fighting against the very things that he enforced. Okay? He already showed his fruit. I'm voting for Huffington. I believe that he wants to lower property taxes and do all the things that I believe in, and that's the guy that I'm voting for. Okay? You have to know who these people are and decide for yourself who best represents you in a republic. Attitude toward property is respect for laws and individual rights and is sensible economic procedure. Attitude toward law is the administration of justice in accord with fixed principles and established evidence, with a strict regard to consequences. A greater number of citizens and extent of territory may be brought within its compass. Avoids the dangerous extreme of either tyranny or mobocracy. Results in statesmanship, what we all should be a part of, liberty, reason, justice, contentment, and progress. It is the standard form of government throughout the world. A republic is a form of government under a constitution which provides for the election of 1, an executive, and 2, a legislative body, for working together in a representative capacity, have all the power of appointment, all power of legislation, all power to raise revenue and appropriate expenditures, and are required to create a judiciary, 3, a judiciary to pass upon the justice and legality of their governed acts and to recognize 4, certain inherent individual rights. Take away any one or more of those 4 elements and you are drifting into autocracy. Add 1 or more to those 4 elements and you are drifting into democracy. It's that simple. We sit between autocracy and democracy. That's where a republic resides. This video is going to be a bit long, guys, but I want to get this document finished, at least the things that I want to cover, and then so we can move on to the next video. Autocracy declares the divine right of kings. Its authority cannot be questioned Its powers are arbitrarily or unjustly administered. Democracy is the quote-unquote direct rule of the people and has been repeatedly tried with no success. Our constitutional fathers, familiar with the strength and weaknesses of both autocracy and democracy, with fixed principles definitely in mind, defined a representative, republican form of government. They, quote, made a very marked distinction between a republic and a democracy, and said repeatedly and emphatically that they had founded a republic. Madison, in the Federalist, emphasized the fact that this government was a republic and not a democracy. The Constitution makers, having considered both an autocracy and a democracy as undesirable forms of government, while a republic promises the cure for which we are seeking. In a democracy, the people meet and exercise the government in person. In a republic, they assemble and administer it by their respective agents. The advantage which a republic has over a democracy consists in the substitution of representatives whose enlightened views and virtuous sentiments render them superior to local prejudices and to schemes of injustice. Madison. The American form of government is the oldest republican form of government in the world, and is exercising a pronounced influence in modifying the governments of the other nations. Our Constitution has been copied in whole or in part throughout the earth. Under the representative form of government, there is no place for direct action. The inherent characteristic of a republic is governed by representation. The people are permitted to do only two things. They may vote once every 4 years for the executive and once every 2 years for members of the legislative body. Now, understand that this is talking specifically about the Constitution of the United States and that union. It's not talking about your jobs and responsibilities and duties at the state level or your local level or your city level or your county level. Okay? No direct action. Under the representative form of government, there is no place for... Okay, we already went over that one. Methods of representative government. Constitutional government may be set up under either a written or an unwritten constitution. An unwritten constitution consists of largely of customs, precedents, conditions, and understandings, and is constantly changing. Any party in power may enact legislation materially affecting the methods of government and the political rights of citizens. Now, one with a written constitution. In the United States, the rights of the people are fully protected and the functions of government strictly defined in a written document, the Constitution. It is called a rigid constitution, because the legislative power has no authority to change it. None whatsoever. It is subject to amendment only by the authority and action of the people through their representatives in Congress. Then it gives you the Article 5 that explains that to you. Since the adoption of the Constitution, our nation has increased its population from 3 million to more than 125 million and has developed from a wilderness to the greatest industrial nation in the world. The adequacy of our Constitution is evidenced by the adoption of only 19 amendments to modify the principles set forth in the original document. As a wall of protection, our written Constitution stands between the people and those who, through lust for power, or the temporary passions of the moment, or for any other reason, would trespass upon the rights of person or property. The original desire of the colonists was only to have a voice in the affairs of government. Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. We have petitioned for redresses in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated tyranny. That's what it said in the Declaration of Independence. The situation so developed that the colonists totally dissolved all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain, and established a new form of government based upon the consent of the governed. Consent in the drafting and approval of the instrument of government and its subsequent amendment was a new feature. When the Constitutional Convention was drawing to a close, several members who opposed the adoption of the Constitution suggested a number of amendments which they declared would make the Constitution acceptable to them. They opposed it because it didn't have the rights of the people in it. It set the limitation of government, but it didn't declare what the rights of the people were so that there would never be a question. Remember, this is a written document, so they wanted to have the Bill of Rights. They wanted to have what are the rights of the people in the document, and once that was done, then that Constitution would be acceptable to them. While the Constitution already contained many provisions for the protection of the rights of the individual citizen, various states, remember the states are the ones that had to sign off and ratify it in order for it to become the Charter for the United States. Various states desired that it contain further written stipulations that would remove every possibility of doubt and prevent disputes by leaving no matters to inference, implication, or construction. It was contended that the provisions of the suggested Bill of Rights contained various exceptions not granted. Why declare that things shall not be done which there is no power to do? The tyranny of legislature is a most formidable dread at present, and will be for many years. That of executive will come in its time, but it will be at a remote period. Madison, okay? Listen to this again. The tyranny of legislature. Tyranny of legislators. Remember, this is 1920, right after we were taken over, okay? The tyranny of legislator is a most formidable dread at present. Tyranny of legislator, and will be for many years. Okay, in other words, we have a white, in my opinion, again, TJ's opinion, not fact. This document is written to expose what's going on and to create patriotism and to teach the people the truth of who and what the America is and what the United States is and what each of the states are, etc. Right? They're over here telling you that at present time we have a tyranny of legislator, and it's formidable, right? And will be for many years. But he goes on to say that of the executive branch will come in its time, but it will be at a remote period. That's our time today, where we're dealing with the executive branch under this fake, false individual and his cabinet. Subsequently, many of these features were incorporated into the first 10 amendments adopted in 1791 and as supplements to the Constitution and are called the American Bill of Rights. The first 10 amendments embodied guarantees and immunities which are inherited from our English ancestors. See, so if you are over in Great Britain and stuff, and you're the English ancestors of us, right? The first 10 amendments that are embodied in the Bill of Rights, the American Bill of Rights, apply to you guys as well. Enumeration of constitutional rights. Individual rights formally guarded by original Constitution provisions. No ex post facto laws. No bill of attainder. No suspension of privileges of habeas corpus. Trial by jury and at places where the crimes were committed, not pulled off to some other location. Definition of treason and limiting punishment. Guarantee of immunity and privilege of all states to the citizens of each state, okay? Guarantee of immunity and privileges of all states to the citizens of each state. So if it's in this state's constitution over here, it applies to every state constitution. The rights, when we're talking about rights, immunities and privileges of the people. No religious test before admission to public office, to which the Bill of Rights added right of peaceable assembly and petition to the government for redress of grievances. Very important, because that's the only way that you're going to hold them accountable. Freedom of religion, speech, and press. Right of the people to keep and bear arms, the militia. Quartering of soldiers only as provided by law. In other words, they can't just be put into your home for no reason. It's got to be provided by law that is possible and for specific reasons. Protection against unreasonable searches. Right of accused to indictment by grand jury with certain exceptions. You know, if you broke the law or whatever, and I mean, you know, if you're a criminal and all that kind of stuff and already proven and stuff, then they don't need the grand jury. No compulsory testimony against self. No deprivation of rights without the due process of law. No confiscation of private property for public use without just compensation. Right of a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury. And by the way, what about old Ghislaine over there? What about her? Did you notice that right before after they selected all the jury members, and just before the trial actually got started, two of them left. two of them said, "Oh, we have a conflict of schedule," and departed from that jury selection. That's not legit in any way, form, or fashion. Okay? So you're already seeing in that trial that there was not an impartial jury. Okay? But this is what's guaranteed to us. So, in other words, they're rigging it. We also know about James Comey's daughter and all the others, the judge, all the stuff that's going on there. Okay? So, what I see coming from this, what they ought to be trying to get her on is trafficking. Okay? Because what you have to understand is that when it comes to Ghislaine Maxwell, her daddy is the one who created Epstein. Okay? Now, I can't talk about this too much on here because they'll take and shut this channel down. Alright, we already got enough strikes. Heck, they just took down one of the jurisdiction videos. I mean, it's just crazy the control that these people have. I'm amazed that some patriot out there has not created a YouTube for the masses. Whoever does that is going to make a fortune. Okay? I mean, YouTube will be taken care of in due time, but a lot of people, a lot of important people, legitimate people, not letter anon people, have been shut down. Letter anon people, they shut down a bunch of them to make it appear as if, they were legitimate. That way people would run and follow them when they re-find them, and they would explode even farther in their following. So that was just part of the letter anon movement. But her daddy created Epstein. Okay? Epstein, or I'm just going to call him E. E worked for G and her daddy. Okay? You guys, I'm sure most of y'all probably already know all this stuff, but I want to make sure that everyone listening to me understands the truth and why this is so critically important. Remember, her daddy is Mossad, right? You're talking about Israel. So, lots of things, a lot of connections. I mean, if this ever breaks, this is going to be massive because she and her daddy are connected to every single one of these children of wickedness. Anyway, let's continue. Right to demand information concerning the nature and cause of accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, compulsory processes for obtaining witnesses in his favor. So, well, I'm not going to talk about that right now. Have assistance of counsel for defense, right of trial by jury in suits of common law, where value of controversy shall exceed $20, protection of verdict of said jury, no excessive bail required, no imposition of excessive fines, no infliction of cruel and unusual punishment, rights retained by the people shall not be denied nor disparaged, powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states or to the people. The framers of the Constitution were opposed to direct government. The remedy sought was to be found in representative government. Madison declared that the object to which their efforts were to be directed was how to prevent a majority rule and to preserve the spirit and form of popular government. The representative form of government was their answer. The United States shall guarantee to every state in the Union a republican form of government. That's Article 4, Section 4. Sovereignty was placed in the hands of the people. Sovereignty was placed in the hands of the people. Sovereignty was placed in the hands of the people. No authority was delegated to any department, either of national or state government, except by the people through the provisions contained in the Constitution. Period. End of conversation. And then Cooley told us that there could be no question but that by a republican form of government was intended a government in which not only would the people's representatives make laws and the agents administer them, but the people would also directly or indirectly choose the executive branch, who would be your president. And if you pick the wrong president, you see what can happen. Okay, so and of course we didn't pick the wrong president here. This was in-your-face takeover, forcing them out in the light and allowing them to be seen by every single man, woman, and child on earth. I mean, that's exactly what was happening there. I believe there were sting operations. I believe we have more evidence than you can shake a fist at. I believe we have absolutely everything. I believe Space Force was designed specifically to track every single package that was moved across during that process. We can't talk about it on YouTube, but I believe everything has been absolutely recorded, and that in the end, when the books are rewritten and education is brought forth and movies are made and such, we're going to realize just how big of a sting operation that truly was, as they allowed them to take over the narrative and put in a false president. Oh, and by the way, while I'm thinking about it, I'll have to bring this up in another video, because I'm sure a lot of people didn't make it to part 3 of this series because just people ain't interested in the truth, don't want to know, don't want to be educated. Anyway, remember what the letter operation told everybody, that the whole point of everything that you're watching in the movie is for them to destroy their own selves. What else did he tell us? Don't mess with the enemy when the enemy is in the process of destroying itself. So once everything was forced out into the light, every single action that they take wakes up another American or a multitude of Americans and people all over the earth. Not only does it wake up the people, but it exposes them. I mean, did you know who Cuomo was and what he was about? Did you know he was a dictator prior to that thing hitting? Most people did not. Did you know about G and E, or G's daddy? Well, you don't know about G's daddy just yet, but it will be coming out in due time. Trust me, it's going to come out in due time. The trial, like I said, they're just going to paint her as the victim here. The victim of E, right? That, and that she's not at fault, etc., etc., etc. That's fine. She's got another trial coming. So don't worry about it, okay? We have to save Israel for the very last thing. It's the very last thing that we're going to deal with, and her daddy's connected to that. So just be patient with that and let that play out. Some good nuggets will come out of it, but overall, I don't think it's going to get the results that the Patriots want, but it's not intended to. The whole point of this scripted movie is to destroy themselves. They're out in the light. They're not hiding in the shadows. People can see every action that they take, and people are awake and paying attention and researching and saying, wait a minute, did this person just say this? Yep. Did that person just do that? Yep. And then they're bringing it out to the public and exposing every single thing that happens, and so they are in the process of destroying themselves. And while they're in that process, the letter operation is silent. But like I've said before, and I will say it yet again, I do believe the letter operation will be back in due time. When? I don't know. Maybe next year. Maybe when Trump goes back in. I don't know. Okay? But I sincerely believe with everything in me that letter operation will be back. But he also told us that we have more than we know, and so he may not need to come back. But I still think he'll be coming back. But I just wanted you to understand that they are in the process of destroying themselves. They are exposed. They're out in the light. They're not in the shadows and hiding anymore. So let's continue now. Let me see one more thing here. I think there was one more thing I wanted to talk about. Let me see. Okay, so here are the delegated national powers. These are the powers that the national government has. It has no other powers than these and no less powers than these. So when they go outside of these, they're outside of their authority. It's anything outside of this is reserved to the states or to the people themselves if it's not in the state constitution. So among the powers delegated to Congress are levy taxes, coin money, pay national debts, regulate commerce, establish uniform naturalization laws, establish the post office, provide for the common defense, declare war, raise and support armies, provide a navy. Among the limitations placed on the powers of Congress are apportionment of representation and direct taxes among the states is determined by population. No money can be paid except by law. All orders, resolutions, and bills must be sent to the President for his consideration. Privilege and habeas corpus shall not be suspended except in case of rebellion or insurrection. Among the powers delegated to the President are execute the laws, Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy, okay, Army and Navy, commission all officers of the United States, grant reprieves and pardons, make treaties by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, nominate judges of the Supreme Court, give information to Congress in formal messages, sign or veto orders, resolutions, and bills received from Congress. Now, powers reserved to state and people. The President and Congress can exercise only those powers directly granted them by the Constitution. That's it. All powers not so delegated are reserved to the people. The enumeration of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Amendments of the Constitution, Article 6. Article 5. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution or prohibited by it by the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So here are the dangers to representative government. Whenever the Republican form of government has not achieved success, the difficulty has not been with the system, but with its faulty application. Several dangerous experiments have been proposed, such as the initiative, referendum, recall, and the election of judges. Departures from constitutional principles threaten to impair the efficiency of our representative form of government, and if continued, will ultimately destroy it. Again, in my opinion, this is a white hat operation. Originally, every influence favored the supremacy of the state as the center of gravity in government. Conferring strong powers on the proposed central government was feared and avoided. With the development of industry, invention, business, transportation, the different sections of the country were brought into such intimate and immediate contact that the knell of the state sovereignty was sounded and the supremacy of the Union became inevitable. But now remember that the supremacy of the Union, that actually became inevitable and is what it is, or what it should be, and it isn't right now. But anyway, the supremacy of the Union is only affecting those 19 powers. That's it. Remember, we delegated to the states certain powers. The states, or the lawful persons, then went out and delegated of the powers that we gave them. They delegated certain 19 powers to the federal union or the federal servant. So that's the only thing that it is supreme about. Everything else is left to the state, and whatever is not written in the state constitutions is left to the people. And all political power is found in the people. New and practical problems confront the government, such as increase of governmental business, rise of technical questions in government, popular demand for greater speed in government action, and increased size and unwieldiness of legislative bodies. Opposition to centralization of power in the national government rests upon the general dislike of concentrated power and its destructive influence on our philosophy of government. This is why when they finally came out with the Charter, the Constitution of the United States, it was so severely limited to exactly 19 powers, and that's it. So another thing that they expose in this document is the multiplicity of laws. The modern tendency of government is to create innumerable laws as corrective or restrictive measures, appointment of special officers for their enforcement, with the consequent restriction of state, community, and personal rights, without regard to the fact that the majority is unprepared or not willing to accept or respond to the restrictions imposed. Relief from encroachment upon the rights of the people will come when each citizen better learns the art of self-government and exercises his right of franchise. The military will control the government until such time that the people return to self-government. Relief from the encroachment of these multiplicity of laws upon the rights of the people will come. It will come when each citizen better learns the art of self-government. That's the whole point of this training manual, is to get people back to self-governing. The problem of capital and labor and employer-employee cannot be solved by unrepublican methods. The suggestion of special legislation is socialistic and communistic in its theory and wholly repugnant to the American character. Socialism, or communism, which negates property rights, anarchy, which negates law, the substitution of direct action for representative government, a government ownership, all should be avoided as perils that threaten the very foundation of this republic. Get it and understand it. What threatens the foundation of this republic? Socialism and communism. Direct action, or democracy. Government ownership of things. Okay? This is the direct threat to the very foundation of this republic. And these are the very things that have been taking place in the shadows this entire time, but have now been released out into the light for everyone to see. Webster said, "On the diffusion of education among the people rests the preservation and perpetuity of our free institution." Education. Education is the most important thing. I have stated this, will continue to state it. We have an extreme task in educating the American people. In the early colonies, one of the first buildings to be erected was the schoolhouse. Here was laid, developed, and subsequently spread the ideals of liberty. That's what the schools were teaching, the ideals of liberty. That is not taught at all in any school anymore. At all. One of the foundation stones of representative government is education. One of the foundation stones. That's why the Rockefellers came in and infiltrated and took over the school industry. An intelligent and informed citizen is an asset to the nation. The great educational system of America makes it possible for every citizen to best fit himself for the task of life. In the common schools, all are taught a common language, a knowledge of American traditions, ideals, and philosophies of government. That's not taught nowadays. It was back when this document was wrote. Okay? And in fact, civics and things of this nature were taught all the way till about 2 generations ago. Nowadays we get this very watered down nothingness of a civics course. Through education, the barrier that separates the citizen from the greater enjoyment of his freedom is removed. A better understanding of American ideals is established, and the influence of subversive propaganda is in large measure destroyed. Education is by far the most important thing that we have to do. And it's a massive, monumental task ahead of us. And we should be praying not only for the Roe v. Wade outcome to be overturned, but we should be praying that God would send people out to educate in masses the American people. We can educate the rest of the world later. Right now we need the American people educated so that we can take this nation back to what it was originally. Direct responsibility to the people. Having derived its just powers from the consent of the government of the United States is directly responsible to the people as the highest authority. It's directly responsible to you. You are the highest authority. The United States is governed by public opinion, by the ideas and feelings of the people at large. The frequency of elections and the short terms of office give the people control. Okay? We need to do something about these people that have been in office for 20, 30 years, right? We have things that we need to fix. And we'll talk about that when we get into solutions. By reason of this, our representatives are slow to attempt any official action overstepping the bounds of their authority or beyond the approval of their constituency. And then restricted immigration. You got to restrict immigration because you can't have people without knowledge and understanding of our ideals and principles and etc. just come into this nation and start doing things, because all of a sudden we have immorality move in, we have unfounded principles move in, people forget what they're all about, they don't remember their responsibilities and duties, and next thing you know, we are where we are today. So, for a proper appreciation of our government, the citizens should know what the Constitution is and what it contains. The selection and combination of these elements was a master achievement of vision, ability, and governmental genius on the part of the delegates to the convention. He should thoroughly, the citizen, he should thoroughly understand the purposes of government as set forth in the preamble to the Constitution, that the Constitution established a strictly representative form of government, and the general provisions in regard to amending the Constitution when, quote-unquote, necessary. All of this is essential to his proper, quote, regard for the sterling worth of our beneficent heritage. End quote. The only antidote to the erroneous and dangerous ideas of government now rampant, right, back in these days, and still to this day, through the world and threatening America is a better understanding of the meaning, value, and importance of our American philosophy of government as set up in the Constitution. This will most effectively meet the propaganda of communism in its attacks on our social, economic, political, and national institutions, which aims to destroy the family as the foundation of society, our system of capitalism, which has produced the great economic success of America, our Republican form of government, and our spirit of patriotism. So he clearly states to you it is the propaganda of communism that has entered whoever made this training manual, the propaganda of communism specifically that has infiltrated this nation and all the nations of the world. So at this point, you guys should be able to clearly see everything that you need to know concerning the different phases. You have the local government, which is where you have your most authority and power and control. You have your state government, which is for state things. And then you have a very limited 19 powers delegated national government for things that are for unification and for interstate and international things that we got to do as a union, and for mutual protection and such. So government is split up in these different ways, and all authority is with the people, not with the government. So I want to read this last little part here. We're not going to go over all this because we're already at over 2 hours. Civilization is built upon the experience of the past. Any improvements that have been accomplished are the results of human achievement. No system of living has yet been devised that relieves the individual of his personal responsibility for the improvement of human society. It's a personal responsibility that each and every single one of us have. By personal effort, each individual should pass on to posterity a civilization better than he found. With what the United States has become today, it won't take much effort at all to pass on something better. We just got to get little minor things corrected, and we will have significantly changed what the next generation is going to get handed to them. But as of right now, what the next generation is getting handed to them is absolute tyranny. And it's all because of a lack of education and lack of law enforcement by the people who have all authority. The sense of personal responsibility increases with the advancement of civilization. Not only have desires and wants multiplied, but with the advance of physical science, there is also a quickened moral sentiment and spirit of philanthropic sympathy and increasing recognition of the responsibility of each man for his fellow citizen. When America was new, she called upon the racial stocks of the world to give their best. Out of these, the best, she has built a great nation. The intelligent, though uneducated foreigner, might have continued to live in his native land without the slightest mental awakening. Once landing upon American soil, he quickly catches the spirit of his new environment, takes advantage of the free institutions, and finds opportunity for development to his fullest capacity. You cannot develop to your fullest capacity in any other nation. Only in America and in the American representative Republican form of government can a man or woman reach their full capacity. This is why it is worth fighting for this great nation. We may have been taken over, but guess what? The law is still written, both for the United States and those in office in the United States, as well as the laws for those in public office within the states. And we can get this nation back. We just needed this education as to what it is to be an American citizen, and then begin the process of understanding what are the laws, what are our solutions, and how to enforce law. Because the only law enforcement that exists, there's nowhere in any constitution defined a branch that is to enforce law, enforce the Constitution against the people in office. That responsibility, since it is unwritten, is left with the people and the people only. So let's end it with this. Individual responsibility. In the very nature of the organization and form of of our government, our free institutions, and the lack of all authority and order other than that created by the dictum of the people, the security and perpetuity of America rest upon the individual responsibility of her citizens. Doesn't rest anywhere else. It doesn't rest with the government. You can't look to government for the solution. It rests with you. You doing your responsibility as a citizen of the United States of America. It is the duty of every citizen to obtain the best possible education. To shrink this responsibility is to be unworthy of the blessings of liberty, and untrue to his own best interests. Every new device, discovery of science, enlarged market, added production, facility or of communication and transportation carries with it a demand for an educated citizenry. Society, economics, local and foreign politics add their demands for educated leadership and participation. Participation is critical. Greater opportunities await the educated and fewer the uneducated with each passing year. It is the responsibility of every citizen to become fully informed, for through education is found the only sure means of perpetuating and improving our social structure. Civilization is not a circle but a pyramid. At its base is found the constantly increasing mass of humanity. Out of this common material, the world has been busily engaged in building the structure of civilization. No one is compelled to remain at the base of the pyramid who has within himself the ability to find his way up. From that base have come most of the great men in history. Few born in riches or high social position have ever achieved greatness. By her system of government, America is at the mercy of those at the base of the pyramid. If through individual initiative and proper leadership they win their way toward the apex, they lift America also. If they remain inert, ignorant, indifferent, they become the common prey of unscrupulous leaders who seek to weaken or destroy the structure of our government. So we're going to end it there, guys, and we are on page 105 of 155. But we've basically covered everything we need. Okay, we understand the American principle, the principles of the American form of government. We understand the ideals of America, and all the different things that we need to understand. We also have very clearly been told that all power resides with the people. And when it comes to the United States Constitution, it is limited to 19 powers, and it cannot exceed those 19 powers. And these 19 powers were delegated by the states, by the lawful persons, to the United States, in order to create a uniformity and a general welfare system, or a general common defense, and all these other things that are required, basically kind of that of the union itself, of all of the states being interconnected. Anything that's not in those 19 powers or not worded into the United States Constitution, those powers that are not written down in that Constitution reside either with the states or with the people. If it is not written into the state constitution, it resides with the people. The people took their powers and delegated it to the states. The states delegated from their powers, some of their powers, 19 of them, of each of the states, into this United States. Having this understanding, then, we can begin the process of discovering what is the solution and how do we get this America back to what America needs to be. The number one thing, education, of course. But what are the solutions? We'll see that in the next video. Get in the Word, stay in the Word, and get the Word in you. And we'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace and love to each and every one of you. This video is now yours to do what you need with it. Educate the people, guys. Educate them. We all have a duty to educate our fellow